Dispatch, getting that done. So it really is going to be the blocking and tackling of government that's going to happen. And then the last challenge I think we have is we've created a whole network or solar system of regional organizations. Northeast Ohio is very unique with that. Instead of having one big flabby economic development organization, we've embarked on a experiment of having a number of special purpose organizations, all with a pretty hard benchmark and metric that they're working up against. Well, part of what we then have to do is then how does governance work to, in some ways, coordinate or make or hold those agencies responsible.
So I want to come back to the thing I mentioned a second ago, because you touched on it as well, Ned, this idea that we have to get used to and accept the changes that have happened. The fact that 271, as you alluded to, Hunter, is now a downtown for the region in some ways. Not that there's a singular downtown, but it has become economically that important. Does that mean that, I think there's an assumption that this effort, the Sustainable Communities effort, will prize urban cores and will create, will help the region create public transportation sort of villages and that kind of thing, and re-densify neighborhoods. But it sounds like that you're not saying that at all.
Well, I don't know exactly what the outcome is going to be. I think one of the sustainability goals is to value existing communities. And I personally am not prepared to make a value judgment between Hudson and Huff about where people choose to live. But to suggest that we need to have quality connected places, again, places. We need to look not only at our urban cores, and I spent most of my professional career dealing with historic city cores like Cleveland and Youngstown and Akron. But we have some real challenging opportunities in preserving the integrity of our agricultural communities. We have older suburbs that were post-war suburbs that also are beloved places. How do we deal with these communities in the face of a mega-regional set of issues dealing with population stagnation or stabilization? How do we make investments that encourage a variety of housing types to meet the changing demographics? How do we look at the way in which we are providing transportation choices for all people, instead of requiring essentially that anybody who wants a job has to have an automobile? And I think what we're going to see at the end of the day is that the diversity of our community is one of our major strengths. We're rich in the diversity of housing choices and locational choices, but we've stripped out an awful lot of the transportation choices in the last 50 years. It used to be possible to get on a train to go between downtown Youngstown and downtown Cleveland, shop and come back. You can't do that anymore. It used to be possible to get on an interurban. There used to be bus service. It doesn't exist anymore. You really are driven by having to be in a single occupancy vehicle, and I think that's one of the things we need to look at. The other thing is one of the realities is that we are an economic region. You talk to anybody in any part of the region, they or a member of their family is living one place and working in some other district. It's not uncommon. It was very uncommon 50 years ago. But today, living in Youngstown, working in Cleveland, living in Akron, working in Youngstown, back and forth, we operate as a region. But our tools and our mental maps are very much in our historic four metros. So I think if nothing else, we'll begin to look at ways in which we can sort of improve the situation that exists, address the obvious, and create the quality places throughout the region that we're looking for.
And Dan, I'd like to interject in a second. Well, no, I don't do anything for a second. All right.
Right. How many paragraphs?
I'll interject for about 4 to 5 years. Part of what this process may come up with, and I'm saying may because it's just starting, might be a consensus policy agenda that goes across the region. There are state rules of the game that may really work against having this kind of regional future work. A simple one. We have in the Ohio Constitution all dollars, all money for gas tax gets spent on roads. For an urban state, Joe Calabrese is sitting out here. I think, Joe, for an urban state, are we the lowest funded mass transit state in the nation right now for the big urban states?
Yes.
That's a policy choice.
Right.
And so to make this a vision of an interconnected but competitive future work, with the region itself, which is about more than 1/3 of the economy and more than 1/3 of the votes, may actually come up with a consensus policy agenda that will take a while to get in place, but I would look at that as a huge positive outcome from all this.
And I assume the people who are working on sustainable communities do agree that that's one possible outcome here. What brass tacks? What is the work ahead specifically? What will you do? What will you get done? How will you accomplish it, Jason?
I think Hunter touched on a really important point earlier about quality connected places, and I think like one of the main goals of the effort is going to be how can we do that? And it's like he said, it's not necessarily about putting all the resources into the urban core. I mean, of course, HUD is interested. It's one of their benchmarks for this project to try to help with revitalization and reinvestment and things like that. But I think we need to have a very nimble planning approach where we look at existing urban cores, how can we strengthen them? We look at existing suburban areas, how can we try to retrofit them to be a little bit more walkable, bikeable, friendlier to transit, some places that'll be easier than others. And I think to do that, I think one of the big things that's lacking in this region, and it's not only specific to our region, I think it's generally across the country, is we don't really have a culture that values planning all that much. You know, we view planning in the United States as a science rather than an art. You know, the days of having, you know, Frederick Law Olmsted or people creating visions for places is lacking, and I think that's something we can change. We're not victims of circumstance to be doomed to that, and so planning in this country is viewed as a very kind of bureaucratic, regulatory, and I think one of the ironies of our...
Is that because so many plans wind up collecting dust?
Or maybe that's why so many plans end up collecting dust. And I think, you know, one of the big things that we can do is to try to create that, and I don't think that's incompatible with our current culture or political environment in the region. And you know, one of the things with relying on bureaucracy and zoning, obviously most plans have the zoning component, but when you get so caught up on that without, I think, having the more comprehensive vision, what tends to happen is you end up with the worst of both worlds. You end up with this onerous bureaucracy that takes a lot of time, that turns businesses off, and yet results in, I think, what most of us planners at least would consider to be fairly poor, unsustainable development decisions.
So is the job ahead then to gather some sort of consensus, Hunter?
Well, the job ahead has been really very carefully defined in a work program that the board has adopted and HUD has approved. And this is for those in the MPO business, this is a structured, defined planning process. It's not just a 3-year-long charrette. We are going to be, it's a 36-month effort.
That has begun?
Yes. Yeah. And it's begun in earnest. It involves...
Actually, I thought it began in Youngstown, but...
yeah, it's
very nice, Ned. Nice.
I've been watching lots of airplane reruns.
I know. I respect the academic perspective always have.
So it has begun.
It has begun. Let me give you a couple of key structural points. It is essentially a planning process that is modeled on ones that have worked in other parts of the country, and specifically with the OKI, that's the Cincinnati MPO, which their MPO covers their entire regional metropolitan area. 2 states. It's a 3-state area.
3 states.
Yeah, a little bit Indiana in there. But it's a long-range framework plan that allows them to do their transportation and infrastructure investments with greater clarity. The process is structured around having 5 work stream groups, and I say that because there are opportunities for people in this room to participate in that. Those work streams will be dealing with transportation, the economy, economic development, the environmental agenda, the community planning agenda, and essentially creating quality connected places. So it's essentially environments, communities, connections, the transportation connections, based on or platformed on a clear analysis of what our economic future is, our futures are, bases are, and this is, I mean, a standard regional planning methodology starts with what's your economic base and what are you building to? Well, our economic bases are multiple, it's complex, but we need to be making investments that will strengthen our competitive advantage. At the end of the day, it's how do we deal with quality connected places? What sort of investments are we going to be making that enhances the quality and accessibility, affordability, desirability of our communities? That could be we're going to do bikeways. That could be we're going to put out a toolkit, and we will, of recommendations for how municipalities can update their zoning. Some of this zoning dates again from the 60s. And makes it difficult to do some of the new housing types that the market demands, but the communities don't have the tools to deal with. How are we also going to be dealing with some of our unique challenges across Northeast Ohio, which is brownfields and the movement of working class housing? It's all over the place. How are we going to deal with that? We're going to be operating also within the framework of our metro areas. Again, we have 4 metro areas. We're pretty unique in the country. 4 metro areas: Akron, Canton, Cleveland, Lorain, Elyria, and Youngstown, Warren, the Mahoning Valley. Those communities, those metros, need to be clearer about what their futures are. So we're going to be working with those communities through the MPOs as a platform to try to convene leadership and say, okay, so guys, what's the plan for the Mahoning Valley? So what is the plan for Canton? How does your piece of this quilt come together? How does your piece of the puzzle come together? We're also going to have a series of mega regional convenings, 3 of them as currently laid out, which will bring people together in Akron, which is the center of this effort.
The world. It's the center of the world.
Well, no, it's equally inconvenient for most other places, so it's fine.
Well, it depends on whether you talk to President Proenza or Ned Hill.
I'll recuse myself from that.
It's both the center of the universe and the most equally inconvenient place in the region. And for those 2 reasons, we're centering the activity there. But to bring people together, as we've done in a number of other efforts, most recently with Voices and Choices, but hopefully with more meat on the bone, more of a sense of where we're going. This is, I think, designed to lead to the sort of implementable plan that avoids that, well, it just sits on the shelf.
And hopefully it will also serve as a platform for an ongoing set of activities beyond the end of 3 years.
Exactly.
And let's think about a couple really big issues. One or two, one that we're currently wrestling with, and one that we're going to have to wrestle with, that would have benefited from this framework. The big issue that we're currently wrestling with across this entire region is clean water, stormwater, infrastructure, and the fact that you're going from something that was a relatively small payment to something that's going to be the equivalent to a house payment when you get done. And has the threat of eating up the bonding capacity of most of our big cities. We're approaching that as 4 individual units, but it really is 2 big watersheds. If we had been in place, it may have actually changed the structure of the court settlements.